The world's oldest civilization, known as Sumer or Sumeria, can teach us a lot about the systems we have now. In fact, you might be surprised to hear about how similar the systems are now compared to back then, really what we have had for thousands of years since Sumer. This is the foundations to what we call civilization, but is it optimal civilization? Is it a world that we actually want to live in? As you will see, we have evolved in our understanding that we do not engage in a lot of the barbaric practices that we do back then. Say, chattel slavery or burning witches, witch trials. These are just some examples of some things people believed in so much so as to go to war with others. Look at the dozens of crusades and jihads and wars over different religions and divine right to rule and kings and majesties, and then going to a republic and a democracy and then experimenting with a bunch of different forms. You can look at all that and it could be quite overwhelming. But we're going to break it down here because you probably were likely not taught about what this thing called Sumer or Sumeria is. Let's get into it. If men ever want to be truly free, they must have an optimal civilization. Optimal civilization demands excellence in 10 primary basics: water, sanitation, food, shelter, power, heating, cooling, lighting, telecommunication, and transportation. Civilization, by definition, is based on the city as a focal point for human development. Yet, since the advent of Sumer, a city model of torment has spread and become universally adopted by nearly every city on the planet. The model rests on the 3 T's of torment: tribute, tithes, and thievery. In modern times, this means tyrants demanding taxes to fund public works, religious donations to aid those apparently destroyed by the inept city designs applauded endlessly, and gangster bankers. Banksters who will either get their loans paid back or your cattle, transport, home, and possessions will be added to their collections. After 6,000 years, it is clear this model does nothing but promote slavery, wars, and death. This was by design, for the Sumerian stranglehold was intended for nothing less than world domination. The tyrants of the Sumerian city-states began by demanding tribute: minerals, plants, and animals. This also later became what was known as burden, a forced labor organization to the state. Anyone trying to smuggle goods to serve as tribute or trying to escape the state labor obligation could be hunted down and imprisoned. I want to add to this that there's a concept known as enfranchisement or manumission, which is when a slave works for their freedom, that they have to beg and get permission to be free from their masters, those who are ruling. Okay, so technically they would be considered free, but not all the way free because they had to ask for permission to be free. That's not freedom. At least that's the way I look at freedom, is you don't require permission to be free. Do you require permission to be free, to have self-ownership? Wouldn't you consider that just part of your nature? We say you have inalienable rights. Well, wouldn't that be one of them? The right to freedom, to live your life as you want? Wouldn't you want that to be the case? See, back then, in these times, that was not a thing, especially because it wasn't taught to those slaves. They may have thought that they were supposed to be slaves, or supposed to be in that scenario under these divine kings, which, are not divine. They just say that they have the divine right to rule. But what gives them that right? See, we are not much different today. Unbeknownst to most, as detailed in Hidden History of Humanity by Polytope Press, ancient Egypt was nothing more than a Sumerian puppet state. After a war won by Sumer, preceding the very first Egyptian dynasty, Sumer corrupted the mystery school traditions of Atlantis, once taught in Giza, an Atlantean legacy site. The Sumer model was then forcibly spread to other ancient cultures like Greece and Rome. Many famous Greeks like Thales, Plato, Aristotle, and more were trained in this degraded mystery school before rising to prominence. So was Octavian, also known as Augustus, the very first Roman emperor, which arose after the nobler Roman Republic and later kingdom was degraded further to a puppet empire state. Money began in Sumer. It was measured in state accounts of wheat, values recorded on clay tablets, and cuneiform writing. Do you know what that means? The first money was based on foodstuffs. Money could thus not grow only on trees, but in the ground. But instead of people commanding all their money for eternity by mastering how to grow their own food, money deteriorated from real backing in food to whimsical backing by precious metals. At first, the metals represented actual wheat stores, and later they represented lies about wheat stores until money is mostly the fairy tale concoction it is today. And if you don't know much about the monetary system, a good book is The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Okay, this is one that I have personally interviewed many people, and they say, hey, this is the thing that really helps me see what's going on in the world. It talks about the nature of the monetary supply. So, supremely lazy, the Sumerian tyrants used brute force to demand ever higher amounts of tribute until the inevitable happened: war. The wars spread all over the Sumer region at first, but later it was an easy matter for the banksters to use agents sowing discontent, leading to overthrows of decent leaders in favor of those controlled by the banksters, like Cyrus the Great. Akkad, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, Persia, Rome, and countless others were swept away in the tide, their national identities diluted and darkened. The banksters not only minted money, but tied it to cults claiming your creators were Sumerian, and you therefore owed them. Look carefully at all the sun god cults and you will find they would be unrecognizable with Sumerian influence removed. The money was minted in sun god cult temples and was stamped with esoteric Sumerian symbols, just like all such money today. Yet, in the last 6,000 years, no tyrant, no cult leader, and no bankster has ever once taught people to have optimal civilization by mastering the 10 basics. In fact, they never will. The only way to such mastery is to learn harmony with nature. This is often why I say nature is the answer. So I'm going to share with you some of these ideas that perhaps you have not been taught that can help this civilization reach its optimal potential, which again, the systems that be inherently don't want you to know about, often because it takes out the business part of it, and often because it makes you harder to control. So let's look at water. The right natural water repels pests by its alkalinity, which also strengthens teeth and bones and prevents many acidic-based diseases. This knowledge is reinforced by Weston Price, who reports in Nutrition and Physical Degeneration that he examined, in one case, 1,276 ancient skulls and found excellent dental arches in every one. In recent times, Jared Judd, PhD, stated that 100% of the Ugandan youths aged 6 to 10 eating natural foods had no cavities. American youths aged 8 to 10 had 70% cavities. Isn't that crazy, right? And you can just look at dental health and look at sugar and look at the things in our diet. I think the Weston A. Price Foundation, based on Weston Price's work, is amazing. If you don't know about them as a resource, go to their website. They have printables and a bunch of really detailed guides. They're very outspoken about everything that's going on. A highly recommended resource for anybody out there who's interested in health and ancient living. Now, sanitation. Earth-based sanitation is superior to water-based and was known in ancient times. Today we have composting toilets and living machines as invented by R. Buckminster Fuller. And this might actually go into Concepts such as food forest and permaculture, which is working with the natural environment. Many people will consider this new, but really we're just reviving ancient practices that have been suppressed and again, not taught to us. Some of our ancestors, our grandparents may have known this, but they didn't pass it down the generations. They let their laziness, they let the convenience take over the scene, the consumerism, the materialism, and it took away a lot of those traditions and close family ties that we may have had at some point. So let's look at food. Food. If we're working in harmony with nature via rock dust, complementary planting, mulching, and more, crop yields could thrive with zero industrial fertilizers, herbicides, or pesticides. No need for genetic modified garbage ever. And again, a good example of this, food forest abundance. They have 50 acres in Florida. They built a food forest on sand, and they got about full yields in about 1 or 2 years. To most gardeners, they'd be like, how in the world did you do that? It's because they built up the soil and they worked with the environment, and they were using a lot of different things, using copper wire for electroculture, using compost materials such as, worm casing, for instance. Now, we can look at shelter. Countless cost-effective, strong home options exist. Among them are modernized adobe, compressed earth, stone, geodesic bamboo or spruce, and many more. Power. We have all the free power we could want. Read the book Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries by Jonathan Eisen for more, or visit the Polytrope Press website. This is a very common talk about nowadays, especially, is this idea of free energy, free power. And you can go to the works of Nikola Tesla and see more about that as well. No surprise, his work was confiscated by the governments. They don't want that information out there. Heating and cooling. We have inventions that suggest we can either use modified vortex tubes and thermoacoustics to increase efficiency with low cost, but ultimately electrostatics may be the best. Now, when it comes to lighting, ultimately we must abandon incandescence and fluorescence in favor of enhanced phosphorescence. Until then, Blue Max offers full spectrum lights that can actually grow plants indoors. These lights are known to improve mood, behavior, and intelligence just like sunlight. Isn't that crazy? You can have lights in your house that replicate the sun. Now, of course, it's not the actual sun, but because we studied nature, we can work with it and therefore get natural effects, I would call it. Now, telecommunication. Stubblefield and Tesla were offering options of communicating with high fidelity through the earth. Countless old patents showed that this could be done and still can. So there's got to be hope, there's got to be potential. There are people working on it. I was actually contacted by people in Africa and South America who are working on that. And they're like a group of engineers. There are people out there who are rediscovering this information. It's just a matter of it coming to light. Transportation. We have water-based engines, vortex engines, and even car batteries that could be recharged from the earth itself. I remember doing research on hydrogen water, not just hydrogen water, but hydrogen-fueled cars. And there were patents in Japan that they actually approved for such things. So it's like, what in the world? Why aren't we using them? Why aren't we looking into this? Instead, we're mining tons of lithium for these electric cars and claiming they're good for the earth. Meanwhile, it's causing things like slavery. Meanwhile, it's causing things like environmental pollution, and yet it's claiming to be green and good for the environment and soy leather. It's like, what's going on here? And then not to mention, but the EMF risks potentially within it as well. So, the options working with nature are infinite, but we will only find them when we turn away from politicians, cultists, and bankers and return to the greatest of teachers, nature itself. I highly recommend, for more information about this article was written by Polytope Press. Go to polytope.www1.50megs.com. It'll be on the screen for you there as well. This article was written by Tim Kelly, so full credit to you, Tim. This was awesome. I love the solutions you brought up in talking about Sumer, because not a lot of people know about these solutions or about Sumer in general, so this is definitely really important for people to understand, especially if we want to create a better world, which I believe is totally possible. And we have a ton of resources about that. You can send us your article. I'll turn to a video for you. Go to theliberator.us. That's theliberator.us. Thank you very much for watching.